Welcome back to Wise Child Pod. I'm your host, Kayla. This is episode 3. And yeah, welcome back. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be recording episode 3 for you guys. Mm, I recently read something about how most podcasts don't make it past episode 3. So here we are on episode 3. And once we get to episode 4, we can celebrate. I also heard that episode 7 is typically where a lot of people stop as well. So once we get to 8, we'll also celebrate. Yeah, welcome back. It's been a little bit of a jam-packed week for me, I guess. Maybe not too much going on, but definitely me keeping myself busy, working part-time, but it still feels like it's just so much and it takes so much out of me. Just to prepare to go is a lot of work. Um, Working, going to the gym. This week I only made it 2 times. Last week I made it 3 times. And like I said, even just those like little things, it feels like it is taking up so much of my schedule. And I probably only work out rather for an hour and a half, 2 hours. 2 hours would be pushing it. I'd say it's probably more like an hour and a half. But to me, like that's a lot of time because I used to try and squeeze workouts in to like from like 30 minutes to an hour. But because I'm going in there and I know what I want to do now, um, I have a lot to get done. And I'm trying to be very strategic about what kind of workouts I'm doing just because of the goals that I'm trying to reach. So all that stuff is very time consuming. But because I decided to prioritize those things, I didn't really get to prioritize the podcast as much this week, as much as I'd like. And I definitely want the podcast to be close to the top of my list of priorities because I care about it and I care about talking to you guys and just having this set aside time. A little bit of the topic that I want to get into is stop thinking about it and just do it. And I think that goes for whatever you can conjure up, whatever you can think about, stop thinking about it and just do it. Because all of your thinking is paralyzing you, it's stopping you. You need to make a decision. And the worst thing is when it's one of those decisions that you're trying to, like, you would like to make a decision, but you'd like to, like, analyze your choices first and your options. But you're so busy analyzing that a decision gets made for you. And that's what you don't want. Um, and it's so funny because I'm talking about it and I had a situation just like that happen, like, just before recording. And now I'm basically on a time crunch to make a decision. And I know that I'm probably gonna make it more difficult than it needs to be because I know what I want to do. Um, but I know that dealing with people, unfortunately, dealing with people sometimes it is a lot of a mind game. You're dealing with your pride, the other person's pride. Um, it shouldn't be like that, right? But a lot of times people mean more than what they're saying to you. And I'm very aware of that, which is probably why I struggle sometimes with overthinking because sometimes I could be trying to read too deep into what someone is saying to me. And I know I'm not the only one, but you mean something behind what you said, and it's not just what you said a lot of the times. So, yeah, getting into stop thinking about it and just do it. This might be for me too, but it's for y'all too cuz I know that there's people out there that need it. So, here we are. Um you've got to get on the move. You've got to make a decision cuz God can do a lot more with you when you're already on the move than he can when you're stagnant. If you're just sitting there, it's very difficult. And I don't want y'all to say, "Oh my gosh, it's hard." Like she's trying to say like, you know, God can't do something. God gave us free will, and he's not going to make you do anything. So you make the decision and then God can work with you from there. But when you sit around and you just don't know what to do and you're stuck overthinking and over processing, what is what are you supposed to do with that, and what is God supposed to do with that? You want God to move in your life, but you're busy at this fork in the road, and there's other cars behind you, and somebody's gonna hit you, baby, or someone's gonna bully you into one lane that you didn't really want to go into because you refuse to make a decision. Like, come on, make a decision. And I know a lot of us can do it with some of us like to like it's tough. It's tough. But some of us like to over spiritualize like friendships and relationships. And I do wholeheartedly believe that God will pull you out of relationships and friendships, and that He might even tell you not to get into some of these relationships and friendships, whether they're romantic or platonic. He might give you a red light or a big fat stop sign and smack it in your face and say, nope, 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 that's not for you. But a lot of people like to sit and wait and say, oh, before, like, if you're the type of woman who's like, you don't even know if you want to go on the first date. I do. It's tough because God will save you time. He will save you time, but a lot of times He'll use your decisions to teach you lessons. And I'm the type of person who I understand, because I don't want a decision. I don't want another lesson in my life because that's painful. But you should be willing to walk through something that's going to teach you something. Now, I'm not saying go into something that you know is not for you. I'm saying go in and be willing to find out. But if you get a clear red light, a clear stop sign, no, don't go. Absolutely not. Um, but for relationships, jobs, career, whatever the case, whatever kind of decisions you have to make, because I know we have to make decisions every day, right? How many choices do we make a day? How many choices do they say we make a day? Like, God knows, probably over 20,000 or something. I'm sure I've heard it recently. I don't know what the number is. That's me just spitballing something. But we make a lot of decisions in one day. So I know that sometimes that can be stressful for people, but we've got to work to make it less stressful. And I think sometimes it means you just got to throw yourself and you just have to do it. And I just shared a story on my personal Instagram that said, go ahead and do it knowing that you're unqualified. Go ahead and do it scared. Do it unprepared. Like, it's there's that too, because I'm the type of person who I'm like, well, I'm not going to go into something knowing that I'm unqualified. I occasionally, like, okay, yeah, sure, I've applied for jobs that I'm like not fully qualified for. Like, let's say there's four requirements and I meet three of the four requirements. I'm okay for applying for that. I would not like blatantly apply for something that I'm not qualified for. Um, but there's just some things that you kind of have to just jump in faith and do, and go for it. And I think that's a little bit of a way to learn to alleviate your anxiety, is to just go for it sometimes and prove to yourself, like, hey, look, like, nothing bad happened when you made that decision. And even when something bad does happen when you make a decision, you have to see from making that decision that, like, it wasn't the end of the world. Like, you can do it. You didn't die. You didn't die. And we just had a situation come up in one of my groups the other day, um, where they were just like, one of us was feeling nervous and anxious, and we still had to do what they asked us to do. And at the end of it, our leader teacher was like, "But did you die?" No. Like, that's what you have to consider. Like, that's what we have to get from that, is that you didn't die from it. Because a lot of times I think that's what anxiety might be telling people, is that um you know, you, the worst could happen, or like you can't even necessarily imagine what the worst thing that could happen is, but like your brain tells you all types of lies and you get to believing them, and that can be really intimidating and um paralyzing, because I've been there and I understand. um but there's lots of different ways to work through that and work get over that. Um, and a lot of it, a lot one big way obviously is to submit that to God and commit to the transforming and the renewing of your mind, because your mind needs to be renewed, because you've conditioned your mind and your nervous system to kind of keep responding to things that are not truly a threat to you, right? Fear is supposed to be a tool for us to protect us. And when we start to use fear as a wall, a wall rather than a gate, I don't know how to describe it, but we start to use it to keep everything out of our life instead of like to protect us. Everything that's coming towards us is not a threat, but you're treating everything as a perceived threat. And that's where we go wrong, because you're keeping out a lot of good things too. And that's the problem. You're keeping out everything. So it's just you isolated. How does that work? Like, how are you supposed to live like that? You can't. You absolutely can't. I don't know how else to put it. Like, seriously. Um there isn't too much that I could find about this in the Bible. Like I in episode 1 I mentioned the verse that says, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and of a sound mind. Speak that over your life. Practice speaking that over your life every day. And when it comes to making a decision, when you find yourself hesitating, make one quick. Give yourself 3 seconds to make the decision. Because you can't live life like, I'm sure that those of you who are struggling with anxiety and making decisions are sick of living like that. Like, you're jealous of like looking around at people who just don't even think twice before they say something, or think twice after they say something, because that is a thing too. Oh man, have I been there. Like, if I say something that was like questionable, or just even something normal, I could have said something totally normal, but someone reacted in a way that I perceived was strange, I would be overthinking what I was saying. I'm like, oh man, I don't think I should have said that. And I'm like, oh, I hope I didn't hurt their feelings, or and sometimes I would straight up go to the person and say like, hey, was what I said offensive? And um, just because I already know how my mouth can be, but I'm saying I know how my mouth can be because um, I know I've in the past, like, I've said things that were offensive that I didn't know were necessarily offensive. And it's like, duh, Kayla, everybody does that. But but I feel like it's different. It hits different when you like truly didn't intend to offend somebody at all, and it does offend them. And we do it a lot. We all do it, obviously, but it stops us. So when I was looking for this topic a little bit, I named it "Stop Thinking About It and Just Do It." Something that came up was analysis paralysis, and that refers to overthinking and how overthinking paralyzes us, because as I described before, like, I see a fork in the road. You don't know whether to take the exit or stay on the highway. Like, whatever you decide, just do it. So as I was saying, when you make a decision, stick to it. Go with it, run with it. And after you make the decision, right? Because, and it's the same thing with a lot of the temptations that we can deal with. Um, we I'm trying to think of the verse that talks about fleeing from sin, right? A lot of times when you flee from sin, oh, think about it this way, right? I think about, was it Joseph? Was it Joseph that was like, I don't know why I'm thinking Joseph. I'm scared to say it because I don't want anyone to tell me that like that wasn't it. But I'm thinking about, right, fleeing from sin. Let's say you had to flee from, stick with me, okay? Let's say you had to flee from being with a guy or girl that you wasn't supposed to be with, okay? You're hanging out with this person and you can tell things are about to go left and you decide to leave. Great. Um, but the temptation doesn't always end there. So, ooh, so the temptation doesn't always end there, right? Because you may run home and leave, but what if the person calls you or texts you and says, "Oh, come back, come back, come back"? You have to then again stick to your guns and no, say no, you're not going back, right? um why that's the example that came to my mind, not really sure. But um I'm using that example to show you, like, when you make a decision, right? You're going to need to stick by it. And after you make the decision, that doesn't necessarily mean that the anxiety from making the decision will go away. And that's what's tough. So as I'm using this example of fleeing from sexual temptation, right? This temptation doesn't necessarily go away because you ran away. That's tough. Um, but you gotta keep going after that. You have to stick with it after that, because if not, then you fall back, and that's where we mess up sometimes. Um, that's tough. That's really tough. But what I'm trying to get at is, after you make a decision, the anxiety of did I make the right decision, that doesn't necessarily go away. And you have to very intentionally keep telling yourself, like, all right, I'm going to stick with the decision I made. I did make the right decision. And if I didn't make the right decision, I'm going to learn. And then we'll go from there. And God can work with that. I think that God loves that, because you are you're when you do things like that, you're postured in a place where you're willing to learn, you're willing to hurt for the sake of getting better. And that's a great place to be. And I think that you really cannot go wrong with that. It's a great place to be because God can mold you from there. You're very moldable, you're very usable. Are those good words to use necessarily? I don't know. I feel like I could have used better words, fancier words, but we're going to go with moldable and usable, okay? Take what you can get here, okay? And and yeah, like I said, you are more moldable and usable when your heart is postured towards messing up. When you're okay with messing up, you're like already your heart is more humble. You are in a more humble place, and that's what we need. Is we need some humility, because a lot of this anxiety and this fear of messing up is pride. And I just saw it on Jackie Hill Perry's story today too, when she was talking about that, because she had a revelation of kind of where perfectionism was coming from. And a lot of anxiety comes from this desire to be perfect, to never mess up. She was talking about how it came from her childhood, which a lot of that stuff comes from our childhood, right? And she said it was super obvious. But it really resonated with me, just because she was talking about how pride and shame work together. And I think about a lot of, like, not to get like too super off topic, but a lot of the people who will present themselves as shy and as quiet, or just introverted. Now, there's nothing wrong with being introverted, so I'm going to say it like this. The people who present themselves as being shy and separate themselves a lot, they act like, ooh, I hate to make it like a they versus us thing, because I can be shy and introverted sometimes too, right? So I totally get it. But a lot of times the thought process behind a shy person can be that the louder person, the more exuberant person is the prideful person. But let me tell you that a lot of people who are shy, they deal with pride too. Like, you're not better than everybody because you're quieter. And you're not better than everybody because you're louder, because you're more exuberant, because you think that you live free. It's I'm holding back. I think that's what it is. I think when I do that deep breath, it's because I'm like, I'm getting too excited, and my ideas are getting too excited, and I don't want to say anything too crazy. Um, but we're getting there. We'll eventually get there, to the point where just like I can just say whatever, as long as obviously it's appropriate, or just as long as Holy Spirit permits, and as long as um all of my listening platforms permit. That's totally fine. Uh, but shame and pride work together. And that's where that perfectionism comes from, and that's where anxiety comes from. Pride, baby, put it down. Put your anxiety down, put your pride down, let it go and leave it at the feet of God. When it comes to interacting with people, when it comes to making your decisions, put that pride down, because every decision you make doesn't have to be the right decision. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes you just have to jump and you just have to go for it. Sometimes you have to make the harder decision. You have to go into it knowing that the decision is going to be painful for you, for people around you, but it's the best decision for you in the long run. That's tough. That we can't all do that. We don't all do that. I would say majority of us don't do that. Sometimes you're going to make decisions that are ugly. People are going to look at you like you're crazy, but it's the right decision at the end of the day. So I say stick by it. So I say make the decision even when you know it's going to piss people off, even when you know people are going to look at you crazy, do it. Like so when I was mapping this out, I was thinking about, okay, what example could I use for a time that I dealt with anxiety? And if you ask some people, they would say, well, she has plenty of examples. She should have plenty of examples. She deals with anxiety. But I can't always come up with them like that. So the example I came up with, right, was even like coming up with this podcast. Like people don't talk about enough how it depends on your personality type, right? But they don't talk enough about how like putting yourself out there is scary. And when I was thinking of my podcast, I was like, man, like, what are certain people going to think about me? Like, I know that I want to come out with this podcast that's going to represent Christ. And I know that I haven't always perfectly represented Christ. So, am I going to look like, a hypocrite? People are going to think, who does she think she is? Or like, I don't know, just what were people going to think about me? And that is an easy thing to, get your mind wrapped up in. But I say, and I had people ask me, how did you find the courage to do this? Multiple people ask me, what made you do this? What finally made you, go for it? And I was like, something in my mind just clicked. Like, I just made up my mind and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. Like, it's the same way with, personal decisions. I keep thinking about like health because I'm currently on my fitness journey, so that's probably why I keep making that illusion. But it was the same thing with my health. Like it was just like one day I was like, all right, I'm fed up enough with, being displeased with my body and being unfit or being overweight. And I made a decision and I'm going to stick by that decision. And now I need discipline to carry it out. And it's the same thing with the podcast, because sure, making a podcast is all fun. Like it's fun. You get to talk in front of the camera, like, have fun conversations, have entertaining conversations. You're putting yourself out there on social media. Sure, that's all fun. But essentially I was signing up for work and unpaid work at that. Like I was signing up for something that was going to take my time, take my energy, take my money, like, but I was sticking by the decision I made. I'm sticking by the decision I made. It is like, that's what we do. That's what we got to do. That's what we have to do, right? So thank you so much. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I guess I'm just being weird. Being myself. Thank you so much for listening to Wise Child Pod. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys for episode 4. Thanks for listening. Bye.